Welcome to Aston Means Business, a podcast from Aston University. My name's Steve Dyson, and I'm a journalist who's interviewing top business leaders who've developed themselves and their organisations here at Aston University. In today's episode, we're going to discuss how a local charity called Standing Tall is supporting businesses who provide employment opportunities to homeless people who are trying to turn their lives around. To explore this subject, I'm going to interview Christy Acton, the founder and chief executive of Standing Tall, who has previously taken part in the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses programme here at Aston University. Also joining us is Michael Lamb. Michael's the managing director of M. Lamb Construction, a company which employs hundreds of people across the UK and which is now taking part in one of Standing Tall's schemes. Hello to you, Christy and Michael.
Hi, Steve. Hi there.
Christy, tell us more about yourself and Standing Tall. What led you to launch the charity and what exactly does it do?
Sure. So a few years back, I used to be responsible for managing a night shelter in Birmingham, in Digbeth. And we saw some of the people coming into the shelter being ready for full-time work. We knew a couple of businesses in the city and matched up some of the people, and it went really well. They grabbed the opportunity and were able to get ready to get their own place. So as I was running the shelter, I saw this in front of my own eyes and thought, this has got potential. So that's where the idea of Standing Tall started. So what we're doing now is we work in Birmingham and a number of other cities. We work with companies like Lamb's who have stable full-time jobs. And we then go and find the right person who's been through homelessness, who has the talent and the motivation to work hard. And the second thing we do, which is just as important, is we have hosts. These are people who have a spare room in their home. And so once the person starts in full-time work, they move in with a host for 6 months before they're ready to get their own home.
I must say, Christy, I'm kind of almost astonished really at what you're doing. And I'm sure many of our listeners are, because we all walk out at night time and perhaps we're coming to Birmingham city centre, for instance, and we walk past various people in shop fronts, sometimes begging, sometimes just looking very vulnerable. And constantly I ask myself, and I'm sure many listeners do, what on earth can I do about this? And we're told, don't give them money. You've got to fund the charities who help them, don't give them money direct. But it's so tempting. One wants to give them money, one wants to help them, but we're told that's an enabling thing. And yet, even though I know that, the programme like yours, Standing Tall, that you run, it sounds very challenging because you've got to find, one, people who are homeless but willing to change their lives, or they've been homeless and want to change their lives. Then you've got to find organisations willing to give them a chance to work. And on top of that, you've got to find people who are willing to help them move into initial accommodation. How difficult is that three-pronged approach, and what's the success rate?
Yeah, it's the three aspects, as you say, and they are all just as important as each other. At the moment, 80% of the people we're helping are in the same job 1 year later. So we're being really careful to work with somebody for a period of time before we decide if one of our jobs is right for them.
So after 1 year, 4 out of 5 people are still working in the job that you found for them.
That's right.
I mean, that's an incredible statistic.
Yeah, but that turns the attention back to the people that we're working with.
Yes,
they're talented. They've got so much going for them, but they just have a couple of obstacles. You know, it's that catch-22 that we all know about, that you can't start a job because you haven't got a home. You can't get a home because you haven't got a job. So what we're trying to do, the model that we have addresses that directly and says, you know, here's an employer, Lamb Construction, who are going to give you a genuine opportunity, and here's a safe place to put your head. And in 6-12 months' time, you've got every chance of standing on your own 2 feet. Just one other, you mentioned about there is advice, I suppose, out there about not giving money. I personally would say that we all as individuals have choices. And if you choose to have a conversation with somebody or buy them some food or give them some money, I think that's entirely your choice. And I think that's the right thing, that we should each have our own make our own decisions about.
Of course. I mean, but on that, I'm still intrigued, and I'm sure other people are. What is your guidance? I mean, buying someone a hot drink, it sounds good. If someone's desperate for accommodation and you can directly fund that accommodation for the night, that sounds good, and I've done that before. But when people just want the money and they want nothing else, and you almost feel from looking at them that they might spend it on things which aren't good for them, that's where I worry about giving them money.
Yeah, and I think that's entirely natural thought process. And I come back to the point, I think we all have to make our own judgment.
Sure.
And every case is different. Some people are comfortable with giving money to anybody, and some people are not. So I think that's about the thing I always say is about having a conversation, that that person may have seen hundreds of people in that day walking past, but not had one conversation. So it's just taking that 5-10 minutes to listen is worth
engaging with them in some way to give them a meaning as a person, like we all want. Give us some more statistics, Christy. Tell me about how many organisations in how many cities Standing Tall is now involved with. And a third statistic that I want from you: how many people has the charity helped so far on their journey from homelessness to having jobs and proper accommodation?
Yeah, at the moment, we're working in 6 cities.
Tell us about those.
So we're in Birmingham, obviously, where we started. I'm really proud that the project started here in Birmingham. We moved to London and Manchester a few years ago. And then just recently, we've started in Liverpool, Leeds and Bristol. And looking forward to the East Midlands next year. But in terms of the number of people we've helped, I think it must be getting close to about 100 people. We started in the middle of COVID lockdown in 2020. But next year, with our growth, we expect to help 100 people just in 2025 alone.
Oh, really?
So
it's growing to the amount of people.
Yeah. We have a member of staff in each of the 6 cities, and we call them our talent scouts. And that's entirely intentional, because that's what we do. We go and find the talent. And we're working with other employers, Network Rail, Amy, UPP, Tasika. So we've got at the moment about 8 or 10 national employers, but obviously we're working hard to engage with more.
That sounds really good. Now, Christy, one of the questions I want to ask you regarding Aston University is that I know you've previously taken part in the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program here. Tell us about that program just a little bit in terms of the impact it's had on how you run Standing Tall.
Yeah, I mean, the program, I did the program in 2013, so good 10 years ago now. But it was, I remember it very clearly being a very sort of full-on 6-month experience with Mark Hart and the team. But I've, still taking lots of learnings from that program 12 months ago about how I go about building Standing Tall. And, whilst we are a charity, we're registered with the Charity Commission, we are a trading business. And hopefully that came from the Goldman Sachs course, is that we charge a placement fee for each person that we match. And that enables us to have financial independence, as, a lot of charities are reliant on grants, obviously. So that's an important part of our makeup, and that's not going to change.
So the way that the charity is funded, which is via this placement fee from the firms which use the staff you find, that kind of mechanism for funding is something which you were informed by the Goldman Sachs program.
Well, yeah, because I was on that program working for another social enterprise at the time.
Yes.
And as a social enterprise, we were always looking for more traded income to give ourselves more financial sustainability. And I've always had that sort of approach, I guess. So when Standing Tall was in its early days, I was looking for ways in which we could have, build that traded income. And it's at about 75% of our expenditure. So as a charity, we get donations and grants, but that just sort of tops up our income. And the placement fee is our sort of biggest part of our income.
That's fantastic. Now, also with us today is Michael Lamb. As mentioned at the beginning, Michael's the Managing Director of M Lamb Construction. and it's just one of the companies involved in Standing Tall's projects. Michael, can you start by quickly telling us more about MLAN Construction first? Where are you based as a firm, and what's the firm do?
Yeah, so we're based in Birmingham's Jewellery Quarter. We're a civil engineering and groundworks company operating predominantly in the house building industry. And we've been operating for the last 41 years. I'm the managing director of the third generation of the family working in the business.
Wow. And how many people do you have working for you at the moment?
Between 500 and 600 at any one time.
Goodness me. So some staff and some seasonal, depending on what project.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, what is it that brought Standing Tall to your attention, Michael? And why is MLAN Construction getting so involved in this project?
So it's multi-layered, really. I mean, I knew Christy from a previous project that he was involved in. So our relationship goes back beyond Standing Tall. But as Christy started to work up the concept behind the organisation, it spoke directly to our business. You know, we're in an industry where there's a lot of talk about a skill shortage, and we're able to offer entry-level positions for people that can demonstrate a willingness to work and a good work ethic. So there seemed to be a perfect synergy between what Christy was offering and the challenges that we face. And you put that alongside our desire to become more purpose-driven and to give back to our communities. And it ticked a lot of boxes for us as we moved into a new phase of the business.
Sure, yeah. And what was the trigger that started your more focused involvement?
So I, as you mentioned, it's emotionally triggering when you walk past somebody in the street who's clearly, struggling in one way or another. And I struck up a bit of a relationship with somebody on my way to work, and over weeks and months, started to build a bit of trust in both directions, and asked him in for an interview to see if we could help him with work. And for a few weeks and even months, it went fine. But what I didn't understand in my naivety is what lay behind the reasons he was on the street. And unfortunately, that didn't work. But even that 3-4 month period, going back to your earlier question, he got to experience normality to some degree, yes, humanity from the people that he worked with. Even though that didn't work out, that was still positive for him and for his future. But what I realised is that wasn't going to be the route for us being able to help people. And as it happened, Christy was already well in the throes of developing Standing Tall.
So you needed a structure, really.
Absolutely. And people who were informed, people who were able to do the hard work of seeing if a person really is ready. And then we're the people that provide the platform and the structure for their success.
Another thing I want to ask you about, Michael, and I know this is sensitive, but obviously in the world we have a lot of mental health issues. People face all sorts of problems, whether it's depression, whether it's money problems, whether it's homelessness problems, whether it's joblessness problems. All those things come home to you in a particular way, because I understand that your late brother experienced some fairly harsh mental health problems himself before he lost his life. I'm sorry to push on that sensitivity, but tell me about that, because I know that that's focused your mind as well.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, so 2 years ago, we lost my little brother Christy after a long period of troubles with his mental health. And it, as you would imagine, gave us pause for thought about what was important in life, what the business really was for, and how we'd move forward, without him. So in the last 12 months, we've registered a foundation in his name, the Christy Lamb Foundation, and that is now the vehicle through which we support a number of local charities, Standing Tall being one. So we sit both sides of the fence with Christy. We're a customer and use Christy's services to enhance our workforce. But because we've seen the impact that it has on people's lives, we're an avid supporter of the work we do by funding.
It's a very strong story to me, Michael, just to hear someone whose family must be going through a lot of loss and a lot of introspection in terms of what happened to your own brother. Christy happens to be the same name as Christy here, but Christy Lamb we're talking about. Yeah. The sadness that happened with him in terms of his mental health and eventually losing his life. but also the positive way that through your charity work, especially with Standing Tall, you're making some sense of that and bringing some positivity in the world in terms of supporting the employment and therefore the accommodation and the move from homelessness into the real world, if you like, if that's not too offensive a term to put. It must be quite fulfilling in some ways, even though there's such a tragedy behind it.
Yeah, and I think we all face tragedy of some degree or another during our lives, and I think the question is, what do you do with that? And there was a period that was very difficult while you adjust to that new reality. But for me, it became clear very quickly that we have to do something positive with all the pain that we all felt. So what became clear after Christy died was how much he'd done in his own private life to help other people. I knew and know what a lovely young man he was and how kind-hearted he was. But inevitably, after people die, you hear the stories that you wish you'd known when they were alive. And so it felt fitting to create a foundation in his name because of how he was. And it actually now offers an exciting opportunity for us to continue to do good, and for it to be in his name makes it all the more meaningful.
Brilliant, a real purpose. Now, given that you are supporting Standing Tall, what's your experience been of the project so far, both in terms of the challenges as well as the successful results?
Yeah, I mean, the challenges for us, which is still something we're refining, is putting the candidates with the right mentors. Construction can be a pretty unforgiving environment, and so making sure that candidates have got the right support network and people that understand their challenges and what their role is in their journey, it has been really important. And the best examples we've got are where we place them with the right individuals who buy into the concept and therefore have supported their success. There's a great story that I think Christy's probably best placed to tell. And we talk about it internally all the time as if he was the only person that Standing Tall or LAMS ever helped, then that's great, but we want more of it.
It sounds like an intro to a little story from you, Christy. Tell us what I was talking about there.
So I met Steve in 2021, and I met him at St Anne's Hostel in Digbeth. He just had a few months on the streets. He'd split up with his wife and suddenly found himself on the streets. He was in St Anne's and he shouldn't have been there. The longer he stayed in St Anne's, the worse his situation would have become. And he used to be a plasterer by trade. So at the time we had a role at LAMS and matched him up. He got started at work. He moved in with a host in Billesley, a guy called Ben. They lived together for 6 months. He then was able to move out and get his own flat. And he's still at LAMS now. And last month, I was a wonderful day where my wife and I were invited to his wedding.
Oh,
which was very special to see him so happy and him leading a normal life like any of us.
So he really has got his life back together.
Yeah. So but we were there to help him out, and LAMS have obviously offered him a good job. But at the end of the story, Steve's done it himself. That's what it's really about.
Yeah, brilliant. Another question to you, Michael. What about your staff? And importantly, your customers. How are they responding to MLAM Construction employing former homeless people, with some of the perhaps non-existent risks that involves? I say perhaps non-existent, but sometimes people fear things, don't they? So if you've got customers and they know that you're employing former homeless people, what kind of response do you get?
Yeah, and I think Steve is the perfect example, really, that disproves the assumption that many of us make. The person that you walk past in a doorway or that you see appearing homeless, he's not always, or they are not always, using drugs, drinking alcohol. In the economy and society that we unfortunately live in at the moment, people are pushed to extremes that they don't know how to find their way out of. And without that release valve that Standing Tall and charities like them offer, those people then can fall into the despair that we might associate with homelessness. The heartwarming thing for me was that as we started to introduce standing tall candidates to the business, I saw the opposite of what I was worried about. I saw our lads on the ground going above and beyond to be helpful, supportive, in a way that again probably breaks the stereotype of a builder.
Yeah, the preconceptions you have don't always come to life.
Absolutely. So actually, what I've seen is our site teams really take pride in their ability to help these people on their journey. And
I've heard anecdotally that some of your staff are proud of working for a company that does this.
Yeah,
that they work for a company that is enabling someone to have a good opportunity. I think that's so amazing.
It is, and again, I think it kind of reflects what I was saying earlier on about us always wondering what we can do to help, but not quite sure. But if you've got staff, and some of them employed with you for years, now seeing all those people have walked past, and now we're actually helping them, it must be a really positive thing for your staff.
Yeah, from our perspective, I think as we were trying to figure out how we put purpose at the heart of the business, just giving money to charity, whilst well-intentioned, can be and feel a little soulless. So for it to be something practical that people can engage with and see and hear the success of what their efforts go towards, it makes it more meaningful, and I think brings it home to people in a way that arm's length approach at times doesn't.
Yeah, just one question I want to push a little bit further. You talked about your staff, but what about your customers? What kind of response have you had from the people you are working for when they know that you're employing former homeless people?
Yeah, that's been interesting because we've got an objective within our business to have 50% of our order book in the social housing sector, because I think it creates that through line between what the work we're doing with Christy and our actual business activities. Absolutely. And what I hadn't fully appreciated is that the investors in some of these large PLCs who are focused in that arena are invested because of the social good that social housing provides. Right. So the feedback that I've had from their senior leadership is actually knowing that they're working with a company that shares those values is going to enhance our relationship. And I've seen that in our order book over the last 18 months.
There's a lot of positive response, isn't there? And back to you, Christy. I know you mentioned just slightly earlier on about plans for the East Midlands. So as what is that? Tell us about the next plans you have for Standing Tall. Start with the East Midlands, perhaps.
Yeah, the East Midlands story for me is really exciting because, as Michael says, half of LAM's staff are based in Derby.
Yes.
And so the foundation, Christy Lamb Foundation, is raising funds through this year to help us with the initial costs of us getting started in Derby and the East Midlands. So, and it will, as well as matching sort of 4 or 5 people in Birmingham with LAMs, as we are at the moment, next year we'll be able to help 4 or 5 people in Derby as well. So it will sort of double our partnerships impact, I guess. So that's really exciting. And but the long-term ambition is that we think our simple model of a stable job, safe home, and the right support should work in any UK city. So that's where we're heading, and sort of step by step, we hope we get there to just the numbers can hopefully keep on increasing.
Yeah, mention those 3 things again. That sounded pretty important.
That's it. This is the heart of it. It's a stable job with a responsible employer. It's a safe home with one of our Amici hosts, somebody with a spare room, and then the right support for 12 months. So we have a staff member, which is called a talent scout, and they work with the person for 12 months, on those bad days, on the good days, because what we've learned is that if any of us have a bad day at work, we can quite easily brush it off and carry on the next day. For some of the people we're helping, the risk is that bad day leads to an exit left, and it's having the host standing by their side that evening after a bad day at work that moves them through that moment, and that's the crucial bit for us. about how we're getting this success. It's that relationship with the host to say, you know, we all make mistakes, you know, let's move forward. And that's making all the difference.
Christy, hats off to you. It's such an impressive project that you're running. And I genuinely mean that. You know, often you hear people say, oh, I'm impressed by what you're doing, but I'm kind of humbled by what you're doing. So, you know, real power to your project and to standing tall. A last word from you, Michael. What would you say to the bosses of any firms and organisations listening and perhaps considering whether they could get involved with standing tall? What would you say to them in terms of whether they should or not and the first steps to make?
Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally, I would say that the business is an underutilised tool for social good, and there is opportunities within any organisation, big or small, to make a difference. For us, Standing Tall has offered us the opportunity to recruit people that we wouldn't normally come into contact with, who have life experiences that enhance our team and, in actual fact, deliver loyal, long-term staff that bind the rest of the business together. So for me, if you are an employer with entry-level positions in particular, I couldn't recommend engaging with Christy and Standing Tall enough.
Fantastic. Michael Lamb, Managing Director of M Lamb Construction, and Christy Acton, the founder and chief executive of the Standing Tall charity, undergraduate of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program many years ago. Thank you both for joining me here at Aston University today. And thanks to you, our audience, for watching and listening to Aston Means Business, an original podcast series for Aston University. Remember, if you've enjoyed today's episode, you can find and listen to earlier episodes by simply Googling Aston Means Business. And there you'll find more than 60 previous episodes that you can watch and listen to. Aston Means Business. Thanks for listening.